we only have the hour today. So I'm gonna talk a little bit fast in some points, but I'll make sure I get this video to you guys so you can review it. Getting to our forms is the easiest part of this training. We can't mess it up because we can only get to our forms in one place. I'm gonna zoom in a bit. And that's gonna be this forms tabs up here, and then we're gonna go to our form list. This is gonna bring us to a list of all of the forms created in the system. We're gonna go ahead and create your membership application today, and then I'm gonna create the rest of those forms for you. To create a new form, all we have to do is select Create New Form. We're going to name our form. So in this case, I'm going to call it the membership application, and we can add in the description. Something I want to go ahead and point out is whatever you put in the form name here and whatever you put as the description is totally internal. So it can be something that is just for y'all's information to know what, to know what type of form this is. It's not going to be seen by your members at all. Then you'll notice down here at the bottom, we have a couple of different setup options. So our form, once we create it, is going to be made up of different sections. A lot of those sections are already built in, right? So there's a login section that's always going to be built into the form, a summary section, so your members can summarize what they've, the information they provided, a payment section, and a confirmation section. So those different sections on the form are built in. Then we have the body that we're going to use to make our form. It's where we're going to drag in what form questions we're asking. The body of the form is really what's going to determine what type of form this is going to be used as. So you'll notice we have these checkboxes down here. I'm going to ask myself when I get ready to make this form, okay, am I using this form for membership? In this instance, the answer is yes. I would check my membership box. If I were to ask myself that question and say no, maybe this is being used for event registration, then I would check my event registration box. So what we're doing by checking these boxes is telling the system this membership or this form is used for membership. So the system's going to automatically pull in your membership section, or this form is being used for event registration. So the form will automatically bring in the event registration section. Now I can check both boxes and use my form for membership and for event registration. So if somebody has to be a member before they can come to an event, that would be an instance where we'd want to use both of these sections. Now the second part, did you have a question?
What if the form is used for neither of those? Like we, for example, collect proxy votes.
It's a perfect segue.
Membership, like, pulling the members. What if it's not used for any of membership or events?
Yeah, awesome question. So if it's not used for either one, we're going to check neither, and we're going to bring in a general section to the form. So if you ask yourself if it's used for membership and you say no, if you ask yourself if it's used for event registration and you say no, then you'll check neither, and you'll pull in a general section. I'm going to show you how to do that because it's just going to be a general form. Now, if we mess this section up, so if you're speeding through, in this case, if I forgot to check if this was used for membership and I just saved it, I can always go back and correct this manually. It's not a lot of work. This is just setting up the form by checking these boxes. It's just setting up the form for me, but it's not a hard fix. And I'll show you how we can bring in these sections manually as well. Okay. Now, once I hit save, it's going to bring us to the form builder. Before we dive in here, I actually want to come back for just a second. And I want to point out a couple things. So now this is what your form list will look like once the form is in here. Now, reviewing these buttons over here that are green, starting from the right, you'll notice I can delete this form. Now, the second that you have a form submission that's been created, we will no longer be able to delete the form. The reason why is because we can use our form to collect information from your members and save it in their profile. So if we've collected information in a specific form and then we delete that form after form submissions have been made, it's going to mass delete all of the information you've collected and saved in their profiles. We know that that's a huge, horrible thing. I would say 99.9% of the time. So that's why the second a form submission is made, you will no longer have the ability to delete the form. We can copy our form. This is hugely awesome and helpful, because if you have a conference in 2017 and you have the same conference in 2018, you're going to want to have two different forms so you can record how many form submissions you've received for 2017 versus 2018. But it may be the same questions that you're asking. So you can just copy your form and then make a couple edits, like change the name of the form, change the dates, maybe change pricing, and then you're good to go. So that copy tool will probably be really helpful for y'all. We can edit our form. Now, we do have the ability to edit a form no matter what, no matter where it is within the lifespan. The only thing is if, let's say that we've asked for a home phone number on the membership application. And as time goes by, you realize we really don't need the home phone number. We really just need their business or just their professional. We can go back into the form and we can add business or professional phone as a field, but we can't take away the home. It's the same concept of you've already collected information in that field, and it's preventing you from mass deleting that information from your members' profiles. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm talking kind of fast. Is everybody following so far?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that means that question has to be continue to be active on the, like, if you're still using that form, like, can you just inactivate it, or?
So we can't technically inactivate it, but there is a little bit of a way around it. You can change the permissions. So like if we are asking for the home phone number and we don't want to ask for that field anymore, we can change the permissions so that nobody can see it. So you'll see it on the back end, but nobody will be permissioned to see it on the front end. So nobody will be able to see it moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's like kind of a sneaky trick, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. We've talked a little bit about the difference between member types and groups and how groups determine the permissions in the system. You're going to see that radiate throughout this entire training today. There's permissions on every single thing you drag in. Now, the cool thing is the permissions when creating a form automatically applies all your member types. So you're not necessarily having to check the permissions every time. The only time you'd need to look at those permissions is if you want to limit the viewing restrictions or limit the viewing abilities. The last button that we have over here is take this form. This is one of my favorite pieces of our forms component. So like, let's say that I want to be a member with you guys and you know me personally, I'm your friend, and I send y'all an email. I'm like, hey, here's my information. I want to be a member, thanks. And you're like, well, dang, Adrienne should have really gone on our website and taken the form, but we know her personally. We don't want to scare her away. We're going to go ahead and, you know, we'll just create her profile for her. So if that ever happens for anything, if somebody just shoots you an email and says, I can't figure out forms, it doesn't make sense to me, I'm older and not technically savvy, and they just send it to you via email, you can always go into the form or go into your form list, select take this form, and you can choose their name from the drop down. You can search this. So this is your entire database in here. And you can select somebody's name, and this is actually going to allow you to proceed as that individual and take the form on their behalf. The awesome thing about this for membership is it not only is going to create their profile, but at the same time, it's going to create their invoice. So you're not going to have to, it's not like a multi-step process. You literally just take the form for them. For an event registration, same thing. Not only are you registering them for the event, but you're also creating the invoice in the same sweep. And now you've saved that form submission in their profile, which you can search by. So you always want to make sure you have the correct form submission for your members, because using that advanced search in the profile list, if you want to compare how many people came to last year's conference versus how many people came to this year's conference, you can pull those reports. So you really want to make sure that you're taking the form on behalf of your members versus, I don't know, I've had some associations who, when that happens, they'll just shoot them an invoice from QuickBooks or something. But now your search results are kind of useless because you don't have an accurate count of who actually came and who didn't. So, and then you can also proceed as a new profile. So obviously if somebody, you know, if I'm wanting to become a member with you guys and I send you my information, you would proceed as the new profile since I'm a new member. And then one other little trick that's my favorite, hiding over here in this left-hand corner. Let's say I emailed you on a Monday and y'all just didn't get to registering me or signing me up until Wednesday afternoon. you can prevent confirmation emails from going out, so I'm not notified that it took you 2 days to register me. Okay, any questions on how to use this function?
So how would be the quickest way to register someone if you don't want to create an invoice?
Why wouldn't you want to create an invoice?
I mean, there's lots of people that that might go to the conference that are complimentary, or people that you want to register that might have already paid. Like for example, with ice cream, we're already invoicing all the people that are registering currently, and then once we have the system, we're going to be adding them manually.
So there's not really, okay. So there's kind of two different ways we could handle this. We can create discount codes, which we're going to look at together in a second. Creating a discount code, you can call it comp 17 would be the discount code. And when you get to the end of taking this form for them, it's going to show you the total, and then it's going to have a discount code line. And then when you put in that discount code, it can comp the whole thing to be free. Now, an invoice is still going to be made for $0. But you want that reflected in the system because you want to know that they registered and that maybe the note is they paid previously or it's complimentary, or you want to know why it's $0. You don't want there to just not be an invoice because later on, 5 years later down the road, you're going to come back and do a search and you're going to be like, well, this person came to the event, but why is there just no invoice? Like that's going to look like a system error because there's no note of anything. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we would use discount codes for that. Now, for people that have already registered in your existing system to bring those over manually, I think we talked about this last time. I would honestly, you could just comp the whole thing, but what I would do is create the invoice in the system for the correct amount, just so that the financials reflect appropriately. And then I would go in and mark that paid offline and use the previous invoice number that they did pay on to mark it offline payment. So let's say that I've already registered for your conference and my invoice number was 2727. I would go into member clicks, take the form on behalf of, you guys would take the form on behalf of me. The system's going to create an invoice to reflect the appropriate amount of money. And then you're going to go into that invoice, create an offline payment, choose other or, check or, whatever you want to choose in that drop down of offline payment options. Probably other would be your best bet. And then you're going to put in the date that you received my money, and you're going to put in my invoice number from your previous system. And then you're going to mark it paid. That way the correct money is populating into member clicks. Does that make sense?
Jason?
Yes. And the discount codes are obviously what we're going to be utilizing, I think, more than anything else. And by the time we get member clicks set up for ice cream, I don't think we'll have had too many registrations so far. We got a third one in from Salpesh, but no, I'm not too worried about it.
Okay. Cool.
And then I'm just assuming when you have that checkbox marked to prevent confirmation emails, does that also include like any automatic notifications as far as like the invoice being created?
It's only going to prevent the confirmation email from going out. So when you guys start doing that, I would make sure you have an invoice template selected that's not going to send the invoice. Because that pulls from a different part.
So every time that we're doing a quick ad registration of somebody, it's going to send an automated email.
It depends on what you have set up in the system. So there's two different places that your forms are going to pull from for notifications. One is going to be the confirmation section, which we're going to look at here in a second. The other is going to be from your invoice templates. So those invoice templates are what trigger notifications to go out. If you have an invoice template selected for the form in the payment section, which I'll show you where that is as well, and that invoice template has a notification going out to notify the member that a new invoice has been made on behalf of them, then the system's going to send out that notification. But if you change that invoice template to reflect an invoice template that you've created that doesn't have any notifications set up in it, then the system will not send one out.
Adrian, would that notification go out even if we entered like a discount code and brought the invoice down to 0, so there's no amount left to pay?
There's still an invoice being created for them, so the invoice would still be sent to them. It would be the payment confirmation notification that would go out to them from the invoice template. So then you'd want to make sure that the email confirmation notification is turned off.
So then that would turn it off for everything though, correct?
Right, yeah, for all. So like what I would do if I was you guys is I would have a invoice template chosen in the form that does have notifications set up. Now, when you get ready to go into the system and you start inputting these manually, I would just change the invoice template to off, or to, not to off, I'm sorry. I would just select the default invoice template, which has no notification set up in it, do your invoice selections, and then I would go back in there when you're done and change it back to an invoice template that includes notifications. It's really easy. It sounds like a lot of words, but it's really easy, and I'll show you where you'll do that at.
Okay, just because, I mean, just in general, this is something that we do, you know, pretty often. Just, it's not just something that, you know, we're just doing, you know, one batch of, you know, one day. I mean, a lot of our associations, I mean, we utilize the quick add registration tool quite often. So that is something that, you know, we would have to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I'll show you where you'll do that. It's so easy. It's just remembering to do it. But like, I'll show you and we can talk more about it. Any other questions before we move into actually building our form? Okay. Something else that I wanted to go ahead and point out is right now you'll see that this membership application is unpublished. If I double click this published, now it's green, published. If I change my mind and don't want this to be published, I can just double click it and unpublish it. Form submissions are going to populate right under this number. So see where this says 0 for the number of form submissions? As soon as people start taking the form, this is going to populate with how many people have taken the form. You'll be able to click on this number and export those, just like you do from the profile list, but it's from the form submissions list. If it's an event, you'll be able to, there's like a little green event register. Let me show you. It's hard to picture. There's going to be like a little green event registration button that you can select as well. So for example, these are all form submissions that have been completed, and you know that these are events because you can view the event registrants. From this view registrants button, you can actually show the status of your members. So whether they canceled, no-showed, registered, attended, you'll be able to search by these different options in your profile list. So if this is something you guys want to use after the event to mark who did come, who didn't come, you can do that. Going back to the form list, I mentioned you can also click on these numbers. So if you wanted to view all of the people that have registered for your 2016 conference, you can click on this number 11. If you want to export these, you can tag all users on all pages. Just like your profile list, an actions button is now available, and you can export these. This is going to show payment information as well. And if you wanted to, you can also view your members' invoice from here. You can also view their form submission, It doesn't look like anything's in here, but if I use this arrow drop down, it's going to show me all of the information they provided within the form. So this is kind of hard to picture since you guys don't have any form submissions on yours, but really just taking away here that you can click on these numbers to export, and you can click on the view registrants to mark the status of their attendance. Okay.
Adrian, a quick question, and this is pure curiosity. Can more than one invoice be assigned to an event registration profile? Sometimes our members will contact us and say, I completed the registration, but I meant to sign up for this session and I didn't, and we need to invoice them separately, but we can't attach it to their registration profile. Is that an option here?
So we can actually edit the form submission. If I go into an invoice, and I've only done this one time, but we can, if I select manage invoice, there is a way that we can make edits. Let me remember how to do this. How did I do this? We can delete, form submission, edit. So I can edit the form submission. So like they chose that they didn't want a t-shirt. If I ended up wanting a t-shirt, I would select, you know, what, and this is just adding a different price or changing the price, whatever it may be. You can also add additional guests. So if they wanted to register guests and they forgot to, you can register guests underneath them for them. If I save this, it's going to ask me if I want to create a new invoice or if I want to create a credit memo. This will allow you to basically create a new invoice that will charge them for the amount that they should have been charged for on the original invoice. Does that answer your question?
It absolutely does. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, for the longest time, I was not aware that we could do that because I wasn't in that deep into some of these forms. But yeah, that's something that I learned a little while back. Kind of a cool trick. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and dive into your membership application, and I want to edit this, which is going to bring us back to the form builder. So I'm going to select edit. Now I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of what this looks like before we dive in deep to what each of the things mean within this form builder. There's a lot in here. So you guys are totally going to have questions. Really, I would just get in, make a test form and just play around, have all of you guys play around in it to really get the gist of things. Just so that brief overview. This right-hand column over here is going to be kind of like your rough draft. So this is going to be all of the form fields that you're asking of your members, all of the sections that you're including in your form, but it's not pretty yet, right? It's not on the front end yet. So this is that rough draft over here on the right-hand side. The left-hand side, as you see, is comprised of 3 different tabs. Everything under form settings has to do with things that will apply to the form as a whole. So these are going to be things that you're changing, and it's going to apply to everything within the form. We're going to go over each of these sections in a second underneath this form settings tab. Adding form elements is where you're going to go. So second tab, you're going to go to this tab anytime you're ready to add something to your form. So if you're like, man, I really meant to ask their email address, you would go to add form elements. Now these form elements are broken up into 4 different types of elements. We've talked about built-in and custom attributes when we went through attributes from the database training. So built-in and custom attributes, whenever you're adding these fields to your form, it's going to automatically, the form's going to automatically take whatever information your member provided in those fields and store it in your member's profile. Now that works vice versa as well. So if I'm already a member, I'm registering for an event, you've asked some questions for me that you already have in my profile, those fields are going to auto-populate on the form for me. So if you need to make an edit to built-in or custom attributes, you're not going to be able to do it here because it's pulling from the attributes where we looked at in the database. So you'd actually need to go back to database, back to attributes, and make the changes to the built-in or custom attributes there. So built-in and custom attributes are taking the information and storing in the member's profile. Then we have form fields. These form fields are the same fields we used to create our custom attributes. The reason that they're in a separate section here when we're creating the form is because we would use a form field when we need to collect the information but not store it in the member's profile. So this would be information you only need for the form submission. Some great examples of this is if you have a conference and you want to know how your member's name is going to appear, how they want their name to appear on their name tag. I see this one used frequently. You would use a form field because they may change that next time. They may not want their name to appear on their name tag the same way every conference they come to. So you would really just need that for the form submission, not necessarily saved in their profile. Another example that I see most commonly is if you're having a luncheon and you want to know what type of sandwich your member wants at the luncheon, ham, turkey, or veggie. You don't need to know that they wanted a veggie sandwich for the luncheon in May of 2017 for the extent of their membership with you. You just need to know that for that form submission for that particular luncheon. So we would use a form field to ask that question. Now we're going to apply these in a little bit together so that you can see how they work. But it's basically going to work the same way as they did from our database training when we created the custom attributes. And we'll do that again together. The last item that we can add to our forms are presentation items. Presentation is exactly how it sounds. It's just how the form is going to present itself to your members. So these are all those things that can pretty up your form. Now, I also mentioned in the beginning, you can check those different checkboxes to determine whether whether your form is a membership application, an event registration, or just a general section, which would be any type of form other than membership or event registration. I mentioned if you mess those up, you can add those in manually. Here's the event section. Here's the general section. Now your membership section will always be in the form, but if it's not a membership application, this will be turned off. So it'll look like this. And then you can come to your adding form elements, your presentation. If this was really supposed to be a survey, you literally were just grabbing and dragging into our form. The cool thing is anytime you add something to your form, the form's going to let you know where you can put it because it'll show you green spaces. If it's somewhere you can't put it, it'll show you red spaces. So it makes it super easy for you guys. So we do want to use our membership. So I'm going to turn this back on. But basically, I just wanted to point out to you right now, the event section and general section that you can add in manually. We're going to talk about the rest of these in a little bit as well. So far, we've talked about how the right-hand column is all about, is just the rough draft of your form. And we've talked about the first two tabs, form settings. Those are changes that you'll make that apply to the form as a whole. And adding form elements is how we're going to ask those particular questions on our form from your members. The last tab you see over here, element properties, you'll notice it's grayed out right now. The only way I can make this pop up is if I click properties for a section or if I click a field on the form. So since form settings has to do with changes on the form as a whole, element properties has to do with changes to particular elements on the form, such as the sections or fields, which is why it only pops up if I, like I said, click the properties for the section or the field itself. I like to think of the element properties tab as customizations we can make to that particular element on our form. You will never remember everything that you can change for every field on the form. I couldn't remember it. I'll never be able to. There's just so many different things you can do. So instead, you can always, if you want to make a change to the login section, you can always click the properties, and then you can determine by starting at the top, working your way down, looking exactly what customizations can be made. In this instance, if we start at the top, we can change the name of our login section. Now, I said in the very beginning, adding a name when you added that membership application name to the form, I said that's not what your members will see. That's only internal. What your members will see will be the name and the tab of every section before they get into that section. So if I'm taking this form, if this reads login at the tab of this section, I'm going to see login, and then I'm going to see the information underneath here. So if you wanted this to maybe, if you felt like that was a little too blunt and you wanted to say login please, you're going to notice that it's going to update on my tab. So now this is what I would see as an individual taking the form. We can also turn on or off the login section. Before I keep going, how are you guys feeling? Everybody with me still?
Yeah.
Okay. Jason, you feeling good?
Still here.
Okay. This is a lot of info, so I like to check in. So this is a really important topic that I'm about to talk about here. We can turn on or off the login section. So I mentioned earlier that we can use those form elements, the custom attributes and built-in attributes to collect information from your members and save it in their profile. If I turn off the login section, my form's not going to recognize those individuals' profiles. So even though we may use a built-in or custom attribute, system's not going to know where to put that information that we've collected, so it's not going to save the info. Vice versa here as well, if we don't have a login section turned on and I can't log in as a member and I already have a profile, it's not going to auto-populate fields you've already collected for me in my profile. I'm going to have to fill them out from scratch again, which, you know, from a user perspective can be kind of annoying. So anyways, I always joke and say 10 times out of 10, you're going to want to keep the login section on. You can determine what type of users are using the login section. In this instance, we've got all users, which is giving them this existing users area and the new users. So if I'm going to come to an event and I'm not a member, I still have to create a profile, and that's going to create a prospect profile for me. This is awesome because it can save my form submission in my profile. So next year, if you're ready to reach out to the people that came to the conference last year to see if they want to come this year, you'll be able to search by who completed a form submission of Conference 2017 application. Even on a prospect, and even though you may not know me, that's gonna, my profile is gonna pop up, and you can send me another email to reach out to me again to come to this next conference. If for whatever reason your conference is only for existing users, then you can just choose existing users. Now nobody can create a profile. So I have to have a username and password in order to take this form. On the other side of that, if this is only for new users, then we can just say it's only for new users, and I can't log in if I already have login credentials. Now, Jason, I think it was you who asked me this question. If I try to log in, if I try to create a new profile in the system, if I use an email address that you guys have on file for me, what's going to happen right here is when I put in this email address, it automatically becomes my username. So when I created your profiles in the system, I think most of them I used their email addresses for. So it'll recognize my email address and it'll say, nope, you already have a profile. Please log in with your credentials or something like this. It's got some kind of verbiage like that. So we'll recognize if I already have a profile in the system. The last piece of this is, do you want to allow multiple submissions? For a membership application, you would only want one submission. An example of a time you'd want to use multiple submissions is if you're collecting donations, right? Because you can have your members donate as many times as they want throughout the year. For event registrations and for the membership application, though, I only allow one submission. Okay, so that's that login section that we just talked about. The next section in here is the membership. Any questions on the login section before I keep going, y'all?
Just wondering, what's the best way to view the form on the front end, like as we're editing it?
That's a good question.
I tried to take the form using my name, and it just says you are not eligible to renew on this form.
Yeah, so anytime you're logged in as an admin, the form's going to recognize that, and it's going to be like, why is she taking this form? She's an admin. It's just going to give you that error message. The easiest way to test these forms is to use an incognito window. Do you guys know how to access that?
Yeah.
Yeah. In Chrome, I always do it through Chrome. There's this little green dot up here. This is in every Chrome browser. If you use this drop down, it says New Incognito Window. Open that up, and you can get to the form. You can go to the form through the incognito window. And then from here, it's not going to recognize you. So you'll be able to take the form as a as a prospect or part of the public and create a test profile. Does that make sense?
Possibly.
Okay. Basically, if it recognizes you, it's not going to let you take it. So by using the incognito window, you're tricking the system into not recognizing you. So the system doesn't know that you're an admin. It just thinks you're part of the general public. Now I'll show you how to get to the web address for the form directly here in just a second. If it's not linked up on the front end, you can just use the exact web address for it. And like I said, I'll show you in a second how to get that.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So we've looked at the login section. We're going to look at the membership section. So this membership section obviously is unique to a membership application. I can look at the properties for this. It's called membership. If you wanted to call this membership application, remember that's what your members are going to see is the name in this tab. Then you can just rename the name of this. We can turn the membership section on or off. We can require the membership section, which of course we would want to require it, but we can also, just require fields in this section. We don't have to require the section as a whole. Obviously, we want to display the application area for new users. And then this can also be used for renewals. Now, your members, they don't need to see this for renewals. They're not going to need to see this. So we could turn this off. Sometimes old school members might want to take the membership application anyways, in which case you can leave it on for them to do that. But usually they're just going to pay the invoice that you send them in the notifications. Now, there's some verbiage in here that's already set in. You can edit any of this text just by clicking the field. So I might not have known that I could edit this until I clicked on it. And now I know, okay, I can edit the new member text. I can edit the renewal text. I can edit the membership option text. We're also going to want to determine what type of member type your member can be. So if I'm applying for membership, I'm going to choose what member types this is going to be a drop down of the member types I can select to be. So obviously you guys have double the member types. One is for early bird, one is for your regular membership. I'm assuming that as a member, if I apply, I don't get the early bird rate. I only get the full rate. Is that right? I have to pay the full rate, or can I pay the early bird rate?
Oh, if you're just registering as a new member,
right?
Then yes, it would just be the regular rate.
Perfect. So then I've selected broker, honorary, operator, distributor 1, operator, distributor 2, single vending truck operator, supplier 1, supplier 2. And I'm going to save. So these are the options I'll see when I'm using my drop down to choose a member type. I probably can't choose honorary, can I?
No.
Am I able to apply for all of these other member types that I've selected?
Well, yes.
Okay. The membership renewal options will always allow me to renew as the member type I was previously, unless we allow them to select a different type of member type, which we can set in the member type settings. But like I said earlier, you're really not going to use this membership form for renewals. Your members are really just going to probably pay the invoices. And then down here in the bottom, this is the body of the membership application, and we're going to fill that out here in just a second together. I'm still kind of working our way into that. You'll notice that there's two different sections of this. There's the organizational section, and then there's the individual section. So anywhere that you have that organizational member type, they're first going to create the organization profile. So that's going to be information about the company address, company email, company phone number. Then they'll create the linked profile information, because you can't have a company, right, unless you have a linked profile that's a key contact. So then the second part of that is they're going to complete information about themselves. Now, if this is a member type that is individual only, and it doesn't have that linked profile, parent-child relationship included, then they're only going to see the individual section. Okay. Then we have some of those other built-in sections, the summary section, the payment section, and then the confirmation section. I'm going to come back to those, but I just wanted to point out that we have these different sections in here. We feeling good so far still?
I think so.
Okay. So I've done kind of a brief overview on what the form looks like in that rough draft. Now I want to talk about some of these form settings and how we're going to add different form elements. So the form settings I've mentioned a couple times, these settings have to do with the form as a whole. When you filled out the form name and when you filled out the form description, in that very first part when we created this form, this is where that information is populated in. Once again, that is not going to be seen by your member. This is totally internal. Okay, so then a second ago I was mentioning you can use an incognito window to test your form. To do that, you would open your incognito window. Now I'm going to use the first part of my URL, which is up here in this bar, up until the /. So right now it's IAICDV.memberclicks.net /. So I'm going to paste that into my bar. Then I'm going to grab the form alias. Now there was an alias created also for content. We talked about that form alias piece. That's what completes the form URL. So now I've come directly to the form. And then that's how you'll proceed to take it as a new member. Okay. Now for a membership application, you won't need to enable an expiration date, but for an event registration, you would want to select an expiration date. So on that date at midnight, the form will be expired, meaning even if it's still linked up to the front of your website, nobody will be able to access it. It'll just give them an error message. We can also determine those group permissions. So I mentioned that those are going to be all throughout this forms training. This is going to determine who gets to see this form. So if for any reason honorary members aren't allowed to come to the event registry or to your conference for whatever reason, you would just unselect them. And now everybody else can see the form except for honorary members. Same thing for prospects. Maybe prospects can't come to your event either. You would just uncheck them. We have some date-based pricing we can set up, and then we've got the discount codes right under that. So we can't use date-based pricing or discount codes for membership. We already know that because we can't do early bird pricing for membership. But we can use these for event registrations, or we can use these for general sections. So we would just set up either the date-based pricing, maybe early bird pricing for events, or we would set up the discount codes. And those are really easy to add. You would literally just add the discount code. You'd put in what you want the code to be. So if you want it to be comp 2017, that means that when your member gets to the end of this form and they're going to pay, if they put in comp 2017, there's going to be some type of discount provided. Now, we don't have any money fields on this form yet. If we did, we would be able to edit that money field and we'd be able to select. There'd be options with money selections, and you'd be able to select exactly how much they're going to be paying if they use that discount code for those different selections. We can look at that more closely when we have a real life example. You guys will probably come across some questions. And then the last piece of this is the forward URL. Typically when I submit a form, I'm just going to be brought back to the home page. If you want me redirected to a page of more information about the event or maybe membership, you would just put that URL right in here. And instead of me going back to the home page, it's going to redirect me. Okay. Any questions on those general form settings?
I don't think so.
Okay. So we've talked about the general form settings. We did a brief overview of adding form elements. We've looked at the element properties tab. We know that that has to do with customizations we can make per field or for each section on a form. We've gone into detail and looked at the login section, and we looked at all of the different sections or properties for the membership application. Now I want to show you guys how to begin filling out or creating the form itself. So I'm going to go ahead and create your membership application. By looking at it, I know that you're asking for the company name, address, business phone, business email. All this information has to do, it looks like to me, with the business. So I'm going to fill out this information in this organizational section. Now I've already asked for organization name, but you guys have this read company name. If it's easier for your members to recognize company name than organization name, I can click on this field, and now it's brought me to my element properties or customizations. In this case, I can change my label name to read company. Now, anytime we create or update a label, there's going to be an export portion as well. Do you guys have any idea what this export column might be used for?
Yep.
Yeah? So if we export the form, yeah, that's exactly right. So when we export this form, we always want to make sure that our export name's updated. Otherwise, we may not know what that particular column on our export was referring to. So I've just changed this. I'm always going to update it to whatever the label is. So we've got our company name. Now I want to add in address, phone number, email, that kind of information. I know that address, email, and phone number are built-in attributes because I know that from our database training. So I'm going to add form elements because I'm ready to start adding elements. I'm going to go to my built-in tab because I know they're built-ins. Here's my address. So all I have to do is grab and drag. And it shows me exactly where it needs to go. Same thing for email address. Now, after I've dragged this in, it's going to automatically show me any customizations I can make to this. If I want to change the name, if I want to make this required, I just toggle it required. I can edit the group permissions. So if I decide I don't want anybody to see this later on, I can edit those permissions. I want to add more form elements. So I want to add things like email, grab, and drag. I want to add things like phone. Now I can make this required as well. I want to add things like phone number, grab, and drag. Is that making sense?
What if, for example, with the address, what if we wanted to remove, for example, the country that the person's in? Are we able to do that?
No, we can't. But they don't, it's not a mandatory field for them to complete.
Okay.
So typically when I do an example of this, I can fill out my address, my city, my state, my zip, but I don't have to choose a country.
Okay.
So the next thing I noticed that you guys have on here is website. Do you know what type of attribute website would be? It's either going to be a built-in or custom. We know that it's not built-in. It's a custom attribute. And if I look in this list, there it is. Grab and drag. And it looks like website needs to be required. There's my required. Now we have primary contact name. So that would actually go in the individual section of information. So that's already asked here in the individual's profile. We've also asked for their title, phone, email. So I know that title is a built-in attribute. So I'm going to add form elements. I'm still in my built-in attributes up here. My custom attributes, and I'm looking for job title. There it is. Grab and drag. We have phone number and email. We know that those are built-ins. Grabbing the phone and dragging in. Now in this case, do we want, yeah, we've got their company. We also want their email address. These are all required as well. So I forgot to make these required. To change that, I'm going to click back on the field, and then I can just toggle on the required. Back to the field. Now this is different because phone number can have multiple labels. So instead it's a drop down instead of a toggle, and I can make it required. Same thing for email. It's also going to have multiple labels. So instead it's a drop down, I can make it required. So I'm going to complete the rest of this form. I don't want to keep going through these same things. And then I'll send you all of the form links so you guys can check them. But does the process of adding in form elements, built-in, custom, does that process make sense to you guys?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay, playing around will definitely help you guys out a lot. Now, I wanted to just point out really quickly, I mentioned earlier about form fields. We would use these if we were collecting information. So like if we were asking, what countries have you visited this year? Obviously, we would want a drop down of all the countries. So I would drag this in and I can change the label name from country to what countries have you visited this year? And then I'd of course want to update my export name. Date was just going to give them a date field, and then you would edit the label. So if you wanted their birth date, file is just going to allow them to upload a file. Image is going to allow them to upload an image. Number is going to allow them to put in a number. Selection, so it's going to allow them to select an option. State is going to allow them to choose the drop down of states, and then text is just an empty text field. So I would play with these. Now, something that I wanted to point out that's unique about the number and selection set fields is these both can be used for monetary amounts. So if we needed to collect some type of donation, we would use our number field, and you'll notice there's a price field toggle. This is different than what the other only number and selections that have these in the form field options. So we could say, please provide your donation amount below. I'm going to make this a price field. Now, the first option it gives me is blank times an amount. I can change what that amount is. This is helpful for like how many tickets do you want to purchase for the upcoming conference. If each ticket's $30 and they put in 5, it's going to do 5 times 30, and that's going to be the total amount that's going to be created on the invoice. Now, if this was just going to be a blank field where they can select whatever type of currency or whatever type of money they wanted to input, like a donation, instead of a number input, we're going to do a currency input. And now they can put in any money amount in here. I'm going to let you guys play with this, and we'll follow up on our next call a little bit more about this, because I know you guys are going to have some questions, and we've already covered a lot of the information. And I also want to continue maybe on our next call a little bit more about the summary, payment, and confirmation section, because these are really important. And I don't want to overload you guys any more than what we've gone through. So I'm going to go ahead and stop for today. Any big looming questions that you guys have? Are you feeling a little like this is something you've done before?
How do you change the who gets notifications for the forms?
So that's going to be in the payment section. See how there's an invoice template? Now it looks like these you guys might need some more of these, but the invoice template, you would select one that doesn't have renewals. You would take the form, and then when you're done, you'd come back into this payment section and you would just select the invoice template that did have notifications in it.
No, I think I meant like as far as like administrative notification. So if we want a form that we're using, if we want to receive automatic notifications every time someone submits the form, how do you change what email those notifications go to?
Awesome question. So we have a confirmation page. If I collect or select the properties for the confirmation page, and we'll go over this more next time also, but there's a confirmation email you can set up. So this is not only going to send them a confirmation page or show them a confirmation page, it'll also show them the confirmation email. Now this can act as a receipt to them. You're going to edit the confirmation email, and you can data merge information from the form submission or their profile. And like I was saying, this is not only acting as a receipt for them, so you can add invoice number, submission date, all that stuff, but you can also BCC yourself on this. You can BCC as many people in here as you want to. So this email will be sent to them, and it'll also be sent to the invoices, blind copies to the emails that you have set up in this section. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Wait, so does that mean that there has to be an invoice associated with it, or no?
There doesn't have to be, but there doesn't have to be. No.
Okay. Okay.
Anything else I can answer for you guys right now? My biggest advice is going to be for you guys to look through some of those videos, go back and watch our training. I'm going to go ahead and end our recording.